I never told anyone about the envelopes. Not my sister. Not my landlord. Not even myself, at first. They arrived quietly. Slipped under my door every month, always on the same date. Inside was a receipt. Rent paid in full. No name. No note. No explanation. The first time it happened, I thought it was a mistake. I walked down to the landlord's office with the paper shaking slightly in my hand. He barely looked up. "It's paid," he said. "Same as always." "But I didn't pay it," I replied. He finally looked at me then. "Well," he said, shrugging. "Someone did." I walked back upstairs feeling embarrassed, like I had accused the world of something unreasonable. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept checking the receipt again and again, as if the truth might change if I stared long enough. It didn't. The second month, another envelope came. Same handwriting on the receipt. Same date. Same amount. That was when fear arrived. Not excitement. Not relief. Fear. Because help without explanation is heavier than help you ask for. I started watching the hallway more closely, listening for footsteps, noticing shadows under doors. I told myself it would stop. It didn't. Month after month, the rent was paid. I kept my routine the same. Work. Home. Quiet evenings. But inside, something shifted. I stopped feeling like my apartment was mine. It felt borrowed. One night, sitting on the edge of my bed, I asked myself something I had avoided. What if this isn't kindness? What if it's memory? What if someone remembers something I don't? That question stayed with me longer than the envelopes ever did. The third month arrived quietly, the way the others had. No knock. No sound. Just the soft scrape of paper under the door. By then, I no longer rushed to pick it up. I stood there for a moment, staring at the thin white edge touching my carpet, as if it might move on its own. When I finally bent down and opened it, my hands were steady. That frightened me more than the shaking had. It meant I was getting used to it. I sat at the small kitchen table and placed the receipt flat in front of me. Rent. Paid in full. Again. I tried to tell myself stories that would make it harmless. A charity program. A clerical error. Someone confusing my apartment number. But deep down, I knew those explanations were too clean. This felt personal. I started thinking about my life in a way I hadn't in years. About the people who had passed through it quietly. About the ones I lost touch with. About the moments that never fully closed. I lived alone, but I wasn't invisible. At least, I hadn't always been. That week, I ran into my neighbor on the stairs. She smiled politely and said, "Someone's looking after you." I froze. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She shrugged. "Just a feeling," she said. "You always look worried. Lately, you don't." I laughed, but it came out thin. That night, I lay awake thinking about the way people notice changes before they notice reasons. The fourth month came. Same envelope. Same receipt. No note. I realized then that whoever was doing this did not want thanks. They wanted distance. That realization brought a strange kind of sadness. I began to feel watched, not in a threatening way, but in a careful one. Like someone checking in without wanting to be seen. I started retracing my days. The cafe where I stopped every morning. The bus route I took to work. The bench I sometimes sat on when I needed air. I paid attention to faces. Nothing stood out. Life moved on around me, unaware of the quiet mystery shaping my nights. By the 6th month, something else happened. I stopped dreading the rent. That was when guilt arrived. I had struggled for so long. Extra shifts. Skipped meals. Sleepless nights calculating numbers. Now, The biggest weight was gone, and I hadn't earned that relief. One evening, I stood by my window and watched the lights across the street. I thought about what it means to receive something you cannot return, how it creates a balance you don't know how to correct. I whispered into the room, "Why?" There was no answer. The 7th month came with rain. The envelope was slightly damp. I held it in my hands longer than usual, noticing the crease on one corner. It felt handled carefully. That detail stayed with me. Someone was touching these papers, thinking about me. I decided then that I needed to know. Not to stop it. Not to confront anyone. Just to understand. Because kindness without context can feel like a debt you don't know how to repay. And I had lived long enough carrying debts that were never mine to begin with. By the 8th month, the rent had become a quiet clock in my life. I didn't wait for it anymore. I simply knew when it would arrive. That scared me. Because when something strange becomes normal, it changes you. I began to feel as if my life was being supported from a place I could not see, like a bridge held up by pillars hidden in fog. I decided to change one small thing. On the day the rent was usually paid, I stayed home. I took a day off work, closed my curtains halfway, and sat in the living room with a book I did not read. I listened. Every sound felt louder. Every step in the hallway made my heart lift and fall. Nothing happened. The envelope still appeared. Silent. Unnoticed. It was there when I opened the door in the evening, resting in the same place as always. That was when I realized something important. Whoever was doing this did not need me to be gone. They were not afraid of being seen. They were simply careful. That night, I took the receipt out of the envelope and turned it over. I had never done that before. On the back, in faint ink, there was a small mark. Not a message. Not words. Just a symbol. A small circle with a line beneath it. It meant nothing to me, but it felt intentional. I stared at it for a long time, then placed it back carefully. The 9th month came. Same symbol. Same place. That was no accident. I began searching through my memory, not for people, but for patterns. Things left unsaid. Gestures repeated. I remembered my mother's habit of leaving notes without names. "I don't want gratitude," she used to say. "I want peace." The thought startled me, but it didn't fit. My mother had been gone for years. I pushed the memory aside, but it stayed close. The 10th month arrived during a week when I was sick. I stayed home, feverish, drifting in and out of sleep. When I woke, the envelope was there. That was when something inside me softened. This was not obligation. This was attention. Someone knew my rhythm well enough to notice when I slowed down. I cried then, quietly, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar weight of being cared for without conditions. I realized how rarely that had happened in my life. The 11th month came with no envelope. I waited. An hour passed. Then 2. My chest tightened. I told myself it was over. I should be relieved. But instead, I felt loss. Late that night, there was a knock. A real one. Soft. Careful. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart loud in my ears. Another knock. I opened the door. No one was there. But on the floor, instead of an envelope, there was a folded piece of paper. No receipt. Just words. I didn't forget. I was late. That was the first time the stranger spoke. And I realized then that this was never about rent. It was about something that started long before my bills ever did. I sat on the floor for a long time with that paper in my hands. I didn't forget. I was late. The words were simple, but they changed everything. Until that moment, the stranger had been an idea. A shadow. Something I could keep at a distance. Now, they had a voice. Not a loud one. Not demanding. Just present. I locked the door and leaned against it, my legs folded under me, reading the sentence again and again. Late. Not stopped. Not finished. Late. That meant there would be a 12th month. And suddenly, I was afraid of what came after that. I slept badly that night. Dreams came in fragments. Old hallways. Keys in my hand. A door I couldn't open because someone else already had. In the morning, I woke with a tight feeling in my chest and a decision I didn't remember making. I was going to find out who it was. Not by chasing them, but by following the only trail they had left me. Memory. I spent that day doing something I hadn't done in years. I opened old boxes. The kind you keep not because you need what's inside, but because throwing them away feels like erasing proof that you once lived another life. There were photographs, receipts, cards with no messages, only names. And then I found it. An old notebook. The cover was worn. The pages yellowed. I hadn't seen it since the year everything fell apart. I sat on the bed and opened it slowly. Inside were names, dates, addresses. I had forgotten about this notebook, but my hands remembered it immediately. It was from the year I worked at the shelter. The year I told myself I would only stay a few months. The year that changed me in ways I never fully acknowledged. Back then, I was younger. Tired. Trying to rebuild my life after leaving something I couldn't survive anymore. The shelter was quiet in the mornings. I handled intake forms, answered phones, made tea. I told myself I was just helping. But I remember one person in particular. A woman who came in late one night with a child wrapped in a thin blanket. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for anything. She just stood there, like she had already used up all her words. I remember giving her a room key. I remember her hands shaking as she took it. I remember saying, "You can stay as long as you need." I didn't know then how rare it is for someone to mean that. I flipped through the notebook again. There were notes in the margin. Needs quiet. Doesn't ask for help. Pays attention. Pays attention. That phrase stopped me. Because that was exactly what this felt like. Someone paying attention. I realized then that the stranger wasn't someone from my recent life. They were someone from a life I thought had ended. A life where I mattered more than I allowed myself to believe. The 12th month came on a Tuesday. The envelope was there when I came home. Inside was the receipt. Rent paid. And a note. Just one line. This was the last month. I wanted you to feel steady. I sat down hard on the floor. Steady. That was a word I hadn't used for myself in a long time. My hands shook as I folded the paper. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was grateful in a way that felt too big for my chest. That evening, there was another knock. This time, when I opened the door, someone was standing there. A woman. Older than I remembered, but with the same quiet eyes. She looked at me and smiled, nervous and gentle at the same time. "I hope this isn't strange," she said. "I just wanted you to know. I'm okay now." I couldn't speak. She continued softly, "You gave me a place to breathe when I couldn't ask for one. I promised myself I'd return that steadiness someday. This was the only way I knew how." Tears filled my eyes then. Not from shock. From understanding. "This wasn't charity," she said. "It was gratitude." We stood there for a moment, two people connected by a kindness neither of us fully understood at the time. Then she nodded, stepped back, and said, "Take care of yourself. You deserve the quiet you gave me." She walked away. I closed the door slowly and leaned against it, smiling through tears. A stranger paid my rent for a year. And when I found out why, I realized something that will stay with me forever. You never know which small kindness will come back to you. Not as a reward, but as proof that what you did mattered. And sometimes, that proof arrives quietly, under your door, exactly when you need to feel steady again. I stood there for a long time after she left, my hand still resting on the door. The hallway was quiet again, the way it always had been. But it no longer felt empty. I walked back into the apartment slowly, noticing small things I had ignored before. The way the light fell across the floor, the hum of the refrigerator, the steady feeling in my chest that matched the word she had used. Steady. I sat at the table and placed all the papers in front of me. The receipts, the notes, the final message. For a year, I had carried fear, suspicion, and guilt without realizing what I was really carrying. A memory of who I had been when I thought no one was watching. When I helped without planning for return. When I offered space instead of solutions. I thought about that woman and her child at the shelter. About how easily time can erase faces but not impact. At the time, I believed I was doing something small. Just a key. Just a room. Just a sentence spoken without thinking. You can stay as long as you need. I had no idea those words would stay with someone long enough to circle back into my life. That night, I made tea and sat by the window. For the first time in months, I did not calculate expenses in my head. I did not count days. I simply sat a day. And that felt like a gift all its own. In the days that followed, I noticed something else. I walked differently. I slept more deeply. Not because my problems were gone, but because I no longer felt unseen. I told no one about what happened. Not because it was a secret, but because it felt personal in a way that didn't need an audience. Some things are meant to be carried quietly. I thought often about the way she had spoken. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just honest. This wasn't charity. It was gratitude. That sentence changed how I looked back on my life. I had spent years measuring my worth by outcomes, by success, by stability. I forgot to measure it by impact, by the moments when I showed up fully without expecting anything back. I returned to the shelter a few weeks later, not to look for anyone, just to stand in the space. The building smelled the same. Old coffee, clean laundry. A younger woman sat at the desk where I used to sit. She smiled and asked if I needed help. No, I said gently. I just wanted to say hello. As I walked away, I realized something important. That chapter of my life hadn't closed. It had simply continued in a way I couldn't see. The rent being paid for a year did more than keep me housed. It reminded me of who I am when I'm not afraid. It reminded me that kindness does not disappear when it leaves your hands. It waits. Sometimes for years. And then it returns, not to rescue you, but to remind you that you once mattered deeply to someone. And that maybe, you still do. After that visit to the shelter, something inside me softened in a way I didn't expect. Not relief. Not excitement. Recognition. I recognized myself again. For a long time, I had been living as if that version of me, the one who helped without calculation, had disappeared. As if hardship had erased her. But she hadn't gone anywhere. She had simply been quiet. I went back to my routine, but it felt different now. Mornings were slower. My shoulders didn't stay tense. I stopped bracing myself for the next problem. The rent was no longer being paid by someone else. But the weight it had carried was gone, because the fear beneath it had been answered. It wasn't pity. It wasn't control. It was gratitude. And gratitude feels very different in the body. I thought often about the child she had brought with her that night. The way she held him close, as if the world might pull him away if she loosened her arms. I wondered how old he was now. If he remembered that room. If he remembered the quiet. Some people remember safety more than faces. That idea stayed with me. One afternoon, while cleaning, I found the notebook again. I almost put it back in the box. Instead, I opened it. I read through the names slowly. Each one was a life that had crossed mine briefly. Each one carried a story I would never fully know. And yet, those brief crossings had mattered. I realized then how rarely we see the full arc of our own kindness. We offer something in a moment. Then we move on, thinking it was small. But small things are often the only things people can carry with them. I placed the notebook back gently, not as evidence of the past, as a reminder for the future. In the weeks that followed, I found myself more open to people. Not in a forced way, in a grounded way. I listened without rushing. I noticed when someone needed quiet more than advice. I wasn't trying to repay anything. I was simply responding to the reminder I had been given. One evening, a neighbor knocked on my door. She had just moved in. She looked overwhelmed. Boxes stacked behind her. "I'm sorry," she said. "I just wanted to ask if you knew how the heating works." I smiled and stepped aside. "Come in," I said. "I'll show you." As she sat at my table, explaining her move and her worries, I felt something familiar. Not responsibility. Connection. After she left, I stood in the quiet apartment and smiled softly. Life does not always return kindness in the same form. Sometimes it returns as clarity. Sometimes as steadiness. Sometimes as the knowledge that who you were still matters. I no longer wondered why the stranger paid my rent. I understood. And that understanding changed how I stood in the world. I moved with less fear, with less doubt, with more trust in the unseen threads that connect us. There are things we do in life that feel like they disappear the moment they're done. They don't. They settle somewhere. They wait. And sometimes, years later, they come back to you not as repayment, but as recognition. A reminder that even when your own life felt unsteady, you once gave someone else ground to stand on. And that ground remembers you. That knowledge stays with me now. Quiet. Steady. Enough. After that realization, I stopped searching for meaning in what happened. Meaning had already settled. I felt it in the way I moved through my days now, without the constant sense of being behind or lacking. The rent had been paid for a year, yes. But something else had been returned to me. Trust. Trust in my own memory. Trust in my own worth. I noticed how differently I spoke to myself. Before, my thoughts were always practical, sharp, focused on survival. Now, they were gentler. "You're doing enough," I would think. "You've done enough." That was new. I had spent so many years measuring myself by what I could manage, what I could endure, what I could fix. I forgot to measure myself by what I could give. Not money. Presence. Time. Space. Those things last longer than we realize. One evening, as I sat by the window again, I thought about how easily I could have ignored that woman at the shelter. How easy it would have been to follow rules strictly, to keep distance, to stay professional. I didn't do anything heroic. I didn't break rules. I simply saw her. And she saw me back, years later, when I didn't know I needed to be seen. That balance felt complete. I stopped wondering if I deserved what she did. Deserving had nothing to do with it. What happened between us existed outside that kind of accounting. It was not a transaction. It was a loop. I began to understand that many of the things we think vanish are simply unfinished. They wait until the moment they can close gently. That year of paid rent was not charity. It was a story coming back to finish itself. I no longer felt the need to hold on to the envelopes. I placed them carefully in a folder, not as evidence, but as memory. A reminder that life notices what we do, even when people don't say thank you right away. I also noticed how much lighter my apartment felt. Not because of money, because of permission. Permission to breathe. Permission to rest without guilt. I slept better. I laughed more easily. Not loudly. Just honestly. One afternoon, I caught myself humming while washing dishes. I stopped and smiled. That sound had been missing for a long time. I realized then that stability is not just about having enough. It's about feeling held, even when no one is physically there. That year taught me something I didn't expect. We are all strangers in someone else's story. And sometimes, the smallest role we play becomes the most important chapter in theirs. I don't know where that woman is now. I don't know if her child remembers my face or my voice. But I know this. For 1 year, she carried me the way I once carried her. Quietly. Without explanation. Without asking for anything in return. And that knowledge has stayed with me, not as a burden, but as a steady warmth. A reminder that kindness does not disappear. It moves. It waits. And when it returns, it doesn't announce itself. It slips under your door and says, without words, "You mattered." And that, I've learned, is sometimes all we need to keep going. As that understanding stayed with me, I stopped feeling the need to protect the story from changing. At first, I held it carefully, like something fragile. Afraid that if I touched it too much, it might lose its meaning. But stories that are true do not break when you hold them. They settle. I noticed how often I used to rush past moments of quiet kindness, not because I didn't value them, but because I didn't trust they would last. Now, I let them last. I let a conversation stretch a little longer. I let silence stay without filling it. That felt like a different kind of wealth. I thought again about the year the rent was paid. How, during that time, I didn't suddenly become happier or careless. I didn't start spending freely. What changed was my posture toward life. I stopped clenching. I stopped expecting the ground beneath me to disappear. That kind of steadiness changes how you see everything else. I began to notice people more. Not in a curious way. In a respectful one. I saw how many of us are carrying invisible balances, quietly trying to stay upright. The cashier who smiled a second longer than necessary. The man on the bus who offered his seat without making eye contact. The woman who held the door and waited until I passed. These moments were small, but they felt connected. As if kindness had its own quiet language, spoken by people who had once needed it badly. One evening, while sorting old papers, I found a letter I had written to myself years ago. I didn't remember writing it. The handwriting was mine, but younger. Inside, I had written one sentence. Don't become hard. I read it twice. That letter had survived moves, losses, years of being ignored. And somehow, I had honored it without realizing. I hadn't become hard. I had become careful. I had become tired. But I hadn't lost my softness. That softness was what the woman from the shelter recognized. Not my job. Not my authority. My willingness to make space without questions. I sat there for a long time holding that letter, understanding something gently and fully. What came back to me that year wasn't repayment. It was recognition of a part of myself I had nearly forgotten. That realization changed how I thought about the future. I no longer feared becoming invisible. Invisible does not mean unimportant. Invisible sometimes means quietly essential. I began to feel less pressure to leave a mark, to be remembered loudly. I understood that some of the most meaningful things we do are only remembered by one person. And sometimes, that is enough. As my days continued, I felt calmer about uncertainty. Bills still existed. Life still demanded effort. But the panic was gone. In its place was trust. Not blind trust. Earned trust. Trust that even when life narrows, it does not always abandon you. I stopped asking what I owed the world. I started asking how I wanted to show up in it. That shift felt permanent. I don't expect another envelope. I don't wait for knocks at the door. What I received has already done its work. It reminded me that the quiet things I do matter. Even when no one thanks me. Even when I forget them myself. Sometimes, the proof arrives years later. Not as praise. Not as reward. But as stability, exactly when you need to feel steady enough to keep going. And that knowledge walks with me now. Not loudly. Not urgently. Just present. Like a hand on my back, reminding me that kindness, once given, never really leaves. It simply waits for the right moment to come home. As I carry that knowledge forward, I no longer feel the need to explain it to anyone. Some experiences are complete the moment you understand them. They don't ask for witnesses. I noticed how much quieter my thoughts had become since then. Not empty. Just steady. The kind of steadiness that doesn't depend on circumstances. I still wake up early. I still go to work. I still count carefully when I need to. But I don't feel like I'm standing on the edge anymore. That edge used to be everywhere. Now, it's gone. I think about how easily fear once convinced me that help always comes with strings. That if someone gives you something, they are taking something too. What happened to me rewrote that belief. It showed me that sometimes, help is not about control. It's about closure. About finishing a sentence that was left open years ago. I stopped replaying the year in my mind. I don't calculate how much it cost her. I don't wonder what sacrifices she made. That would turn gratitude into guilt. And that's not what she intended. She wanted me to feel steady. So I let myself feel that. I noticed how differently I respond when someone asks for help now. I don't jump to solutions. I don't overextend. I ask one simple question. What do you need right now? Sometimes the answer surprises me. Often, it's something small. A pause. A quiet place. Someone to listen without fixing. I understand that need now. I've lived it. One afternoon, while standing in line at the grocery store, I saw a woman struggling to keep her coins from spilling onto the floor. People shifted impatiently behind her. I stepped forward and held the basket while she gathered them. She looked up and whispered, "Thank you." Nothing else. No story. No explanation. I smiled and nodded. And for a moment, I felt the circle complete itself again. Not because I had given something back, but because I had stayed open. That openness feels like the true gift I received that year. Not free rent, but the reminder that I am still someone who notices. Someone who pauses. Someone who makes room. I don't expect life to be generous all the time. Life is complicated. But I trust now that what we put into it does not vanish. It moves quietly. It waits. And when it returns, it doesn't ask for recognition. It asks only that you receive it without fear. I received it. And I carry it with me, into ordinary days, ordinary moments. Steady. Grateful. Unhidden. That's how I continue. As I continue living with that steadiness, I notice how much less I try to protect myself from life. For a long time, protection meant distance. It meant keeping my head down and my expectations low. Now, protection means something gentler. It means staying open without being careless. It means trusting my judgment without hardening my heart. That balance feels new, but it feels right. I think about how that year changed my relationship with time. Before, I lived 1 month at a time, counting days, watching deadlines. During that year, time softened. Not because money solved everything, but because fear loosened its grip. And fear, I've learned, is what makes time feel sharp. I stopped living in constant preparation mode. Preparing for loss. Preparing for disappointment. Instead, I started living in response. Responding to what was actually happening, not what I imagined might. That shift gave me energy I didn't know I still had. I noticed how often I had been apologizing to myself for needing help. As if needing help was a failure. Now, I understand something simple. Needing help is not weakness. Refusing it when it comes can be. Accepting help without suspicion takes courage too. That year taught me how to accept without shrinking. I stopped asking myself if I was worthy of kindness. Kindness does not ask that question. It arrives because someone remembers what it felt like to need it. I think again of the shelter. Of the quiet room. Of the key placed in a trembling hand. At the time, I believed I was just doing my job. Now, I understand I was doing something else. I was witnessing. And being witnessed, even briefly, can change the direction of a life. I didn't change her life alone. Others helped her too. But I was part of her turning point. And years later, she was part of mine. That mutuality feels important. It reminds me that life is not a straight line. It's a series of crossings. Paths touch, separate, and sometimes meet again in unexpected ways. I no longer feel small when I think about my place in the world. I feel connected. Not loudly. Quietly. Connection does not need constant proof. It shows up in moments of recognition. In small gestures that say, I see you. I try to offer those gestures now, when I can. Without planning for outcomes. Without expecting returns. Because I know now how powerful that can be. I don't tell this story to impress anyone. I tell it to remember. To remember that the year I thought I was being carried was also the year I learned how to stand again. To remember that generosity is not always about giving money. Sometimes it's about giving someone the feeling that they are not alone. That feeling stayed with me longer than the rent ever did. It shows up when I hesitate less. When I breathe more deeply. When I trust the ground beneath my feet. I am still careful. I am still practical. But I am no longer afraid of receiving. I am no longer afraid of being seen. And I am no longer afraid that kindness will disappear if I don't hold it tightly. It doesn't need to be held. It moves on its own. And when it returns, it does so quietly, gently, exactly when it is needed. That is what I learned. And that is how I continue living now. Not waiting for miracles. Not doubting the past. Just trusting that the small, honest things we do echo longer than we know. Steady. Grateful. Present. As that trust settled into my daily life, I stopped thinking of what happened as something unusual. It no longer felt like a miracle. It felt like a reminder. A reminder that life is always listening, even when it seems quiet. I noticed how easily I returned to myself now when stress appeared. Bills still came. Problems still showed up. But they didn't knock me off balance the way they used to. I handled them one by one. Without panic. Without the feeling that one mistake would undo everything. That sense of stability did not come from money. It came from knowing that I had once mattered deeply to someone without knowing it. And that meant I probably mattered in ways I still couldn't see. I began to trust my past self more. The woman I had once been. The woman who stayed late at the shelter even when she was tired. The woman who spoke gently because she knew how sharp the world could be. I stopped treating that version of me like someone naive. She wasn't naive. She was open. And openness is not weakness. It is risk. I no longer feel embarrassed about the year my rent was paid. I don't hide it in my memory. I hold it with respect. Not because I was helped, but because I was remembered. Remembered for something good. That matters. I also stopped worrying that kindness must always be repaid. Some kindness closes a loop instead of creating debt. That year closed a loop that had been open for a long time. It brought balance where there had been quiet imbalance. I noticed how differently I speak about my life now. Not with apology, not with defense, just truth. I don't over-explain my struggles. I don't exaggerate my resilience. I let my life be what it is. That honesty feels freeing. Sometimes, when I sit quietly in the evening, I think about the idea of strangers. How we label people that way when we don't know their stories. But after what happened, I don't think of her as a stranger anymore. She was someone whose life once crossed mine deeply. Time had separated us, but meaning hadn't. I think that's true for many people we call strangers. We just don't know yet how we are connected. I no longer wait for signs or confirmations from life. What I needed has already arrived. Not in the form I expected, but in the form that mattered most. A reminder of who I am when I'm not afraid. I continue to live simply. I pay my rent now. I make my tea. I lock my door at night. But I do these things with a steadier heart. With a quiet confidence that doesn't need explanation. And if I ever doubt myself again, if fear creeps back in, I know what I will remember. I will remember that somewhere, in someone else's life, I was not invisible. I was part of their survival. And that truth is something no amount of hardship can erase. That knowledge walks with me now. Not loudly, not urgently, just present. Like a steady breath. Like ground beneath my feet. And that is how I continue. One ordinary day at a time. As I move forward with that quiet knowledge, I don't feel the need to add anything more to the story. Nothing is missing. What happened did not leave a gap that needs filling. It left a foundation. I wake up now with a different kind of awareness. Not the alertness that comes from worry, but the awareness that comes from trust. I trust that I can handle what comes. I trust that I don't have to see every thread to know they exist. That trust has changed the way I move through the world. I no longer rush past moments of stillness. If a morning is quiet, I let it be quiet. If a thought arrives, I sit with it instead of pushing it away. That patience feels like something I earned slowly. I think about how many years I lived believing that stability was something you achieve once and then defend forever. Now I understand it differently. Stability is something you practice. In how you speak to yourself. In how you accept help when it appears. In how you let go of shame that no longer belongs to you. I practice that now. Some days are easier than others. Some days I still feel the old tightness in my chest, the reflex to prepare for loss. When that happens, I don't judge myself. I remind myself gently, you've been here before. You know how to stand. That reminder is enough. I don't wonder anymore if the woman thinks about me. I don't need to. What we shared has already done its work. It gave both of us something we needed at different times. That is how life balances itself, quietly. I continue to live in this apartment. The walls are the same. The hallway sounds are the same. But I am not the same. I carry myself with more ease. With less resistance. With the understanding that even when I feel small, my actions are not. I have stopped underestimating the impact of kindness. I have also stopped underestimating myself. That may be the greatest gift that year gave me. Not the relief of paid rent, but the reminder that my presence once mattered enough to change someone's life. And that means my presence still matters now. I don't need to see the results of every good thing I do. I don't need proof every time. I have proof already. It came quietly, month after month, under my door. It said everything without saying much at all. So I live on. Paying my bills. Showing up to work. Listening when someone needs space. doing small things carefully. Because I know now that small things are never really small. They travel farther than we think. They wait. And sometimes, when we need it most, they come back to us and say, "You did something good. It mattered. And you are still standing because of it." That is where I leave this story. Not with surprise. Not with drama. But with steadiness. With gratitude. With a quiet certainty that kindness, once given, does not disappear. It stays. And so do I. As I sit with that certainty, I don't feel the urge to look back anymore. Not because the past has faded, but because it has settled where it belongs. For a long time, my life felt like it was built on uncertainty. One unexpected expense away from falling apart. One bad month away from losing ground. That year changed something deeper than my finances. It changed how safe I felt inside myself. I no longer confuse struggle with failure. I no longer see asking for help as something shameful. Life does not reward strength the way stories say it does. It responds to honesty. And that honesty can be quiet. I've learned that steadiness is not about having everything under control. It's about trusting that even when things wobble, you won't disappear. I don't romanticize what happened. I don't tell myself it was destiny or fate. It was human. One person remembering another. One kindness closing a circle. That feels enough. Sometimes, when I think about that year, I imagine the moment she decided to do it. Not dramatically. Not with tears. Just a decision made quietly. I can do this. I will. That kind of decision doesn't need an audience. It changes lives anyway. I live differently now because of it. Not louder. Not bolder. Kinder. More patient. More willing to pause instead of push. If there is one thing I carry forward, it is this. You don't always see the impact of who you are being in the world. You don't always know who is watching, remembering, holding on to what you offered. But that doesn't mean it didn't matter. It means it mattered enough to last. I don't wait for envelopes anymore. I don't listen for footsteps in the hallway. Those chapters are complete. What remains is something quieter and stronger. A sense of belonging to my own life. A trust that I am not as alone as I once believed. I go on now with that trust. Paying my rent. Making my tea. Opening my door each morning without fear. And when I offer kindness, I offer it freely. Without expectation. Without calculation. Because I know now how far it can travel. This story doesn't end with a stranger at my door. It ends with me standing steady where I am. Knowing that somewhere, in the invisible threads that connect us all, what we give returns not to bind us, but to remind us who we are. And that reminder is enough to keep me moving forward. Quietly. Honestly. One ordinary, meaningful day at a time. As I let this story come to its natural close, I feel no urgency to add anything dramatic. Life rarely closes chapters with music or announcements. It closes them with understanding. I understand now that what I received was never meant to change my life overnight. It was meant to steady it. And steadiness is a quiet thing. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't draw attention. It allows you to stand without shaking. I think about how different I would have been if that year had never happened. I would have survived anyway. I always did. But I would have carried a little more fear. A little more doubt. That year took those things and softened them. Not completely. Just enough. Enough for me to breathe. I no longer feel the need to revisit every detail. The receipts. The notes. The timing. Those things served their purpose. What matters now is what stayed after they were gone. What stayed was trust. Trust that I am capable of giving something meaningful to another person, even when I don't feel strong myself. Trust that my life is more than the narrow moments where I struggled. Trust that kindness, once released, does not vanish into nothing. It becomes part of the world's quiet structure, holding things up in ways we rarely notice. I don't think of her as the stranger anymore. She is simply someone whose life once intersected with mine in a way that mattered. Time turned us into strangers again, but meaning remained. That feels honest. I don't search for signs anymore. I don't look for proof that I am on the right path. The proof lives in how I feel when I wake up. Calm. Capable. Here. I carry this story with me not as something extraordinary, but as something grounding. A reminder that the smallest moments of decency can travel further than we ever expect. And that sometimes, when life feels like it is taking from you again and again, it is only balancing something you gave long ago. I go on now without watching the floor for envelopes, without listening for knocks. Those sounds belong to a finished chapter. What remains is quieter, a sense of being held by the life I am living, not because it is easy, but because it is real. I stand where I am. I do what I can. I stay open. And when kindness crosses my path, whether I give it or receive it, I do not question it anymore. I let it pass through my hands, knowing it will find where it needs to go. That is where this story rests. Not in mystery, not in surprise, but in steadiness, in gratitude, in the quiet knowledge that nothing good we do is ever truly lost. And with that knowledge, I continue. Here. Now. Enough. As I sit with everything that happened, I don't feel the need to hold on to it anymore. Not because it doesn't matter, but because it has settled exactly where it belongs. For a long time, I believed stability was something fragile, something that could disappear the moment I relaxed. Now I know better. Stability is not the absence of struggle. It is the presence of trust. That year did not remove difficulty from my life. It changed how I carried it. I no longer live as if everything good must be temporary. I no longer assume that support always comes with a cost. Sometimes, it comes with memory. Sometimes, it comes with gratitude that waited until it was strong enough to return. I don't replay the details anymore. I don't wonder what I would say if I met her again. What needed to be said was already spoken through action, through consistency, through care, through a quiet promise kept for a year. I think about how many people walk through life never knowing which moments will matter later, which small decisions will echo, which simple kindness will become someone else's foundation. We rarely know, and maybe that's the point. If we knew, we might do things for the wrong reasons. I didn't help that night at the shelter expecting anything back. I didn't even remember it clearly until it returned to me. And when it did return, it didn't ask for recognition. It didn't ask for gratitude. It simply said, in the only way it could, you were seen. You mattered. And what you gave was not forgotten. That knowledge has changed how I move through the world. I am slower now, more deliberate. I listen more than I speak. I notice when someone needs quiet instead of advice. I don't rush past moments that feel small, because I know now that small moments are often the ones that last. I pay my rent each month. I close my door at night. I wake up and step into ordinary days. But those days feel different. They feel grounded. I no longer feel like I am standing on the edge of something fragile. I feel like I am standing on something built over time. Quietly, patiently, honestly. This story doesn't end with a stranger. It ends with understanding. It ends with a woman who knows now that her life has weight beyond what she can see. That her choices, even the quiet ones, leave marks. And that kindness, once given freely, does not disappear into the air. It waits. And when it returns, it does not arrive to impress you. It arrives to steady you. That is what happened to me. And that is what stays. I go on now without fear of needing help again. Without fear of being forgotten. I go on knowing that I am part of something larger than my worries. Something human. Something enduring. And that is enough. That is where this story truly ends. Not with surprise. Not with drama. But with peace. As I let this story move toward its final place, I feel no urge to decorate it with anything extra. Everything that mattered has already been said. What remains is the quiet truth that stayed after the surprise faded. I think now about how easily life can make us believe we are alone in our efforts. How many days we move through without knowing who notices our presence, our patience, our small acts of care. Most of the time, no one says anything. And we assume nothing landed. This experience taught me otherwise. It taught me that some things land so deeply that they take years to rise back to the surface. That year did not make me rich. It did not solve my future. But it gave me something far more stable. A sense that my life is connected in ways I don't always see. I stopped thinking of myself as someone who just gets through things. I started seeing myself as someone whose presence can make a difference, even when I feel tired, even when I feel small. That change stays with you. It changes how you show up. I notice now how I respond when someone is overwhelmed. I don't rush them. I don't minimize what they feel. I remember how it felt to stand quietly at the edge of stability, unsure if the ground would hold. And I try to be solid in small ways. Not dramatic. Just reliable. I don't believe everything happens for a reason. But I do believe some things happen to remind us who we are. That year reminded me that I am someone who once offered safety without realizing how rare that was. And being reminded of that gave me back a part of myself I had slowly misplaced. I don't think about the money anymore. I think about the intention. About the patience it took to show up every month without being seen. About the discipline of kindness that asks for nothing in return. That kind of care leaves a mark. It left one on me. I carry it now into the way I live. Into how I speak. Into how I listen. I don't try to repay what I was given. I don't think that's possible. Instead, I let it shape how I treat the world. Quietly. Without announcements. I know now that the smallest gestures often travel the farthest. They move through time. They wait. And when they return, they don't come back as rewards. They come back as steadiness. As reassurance. As a soft hand on your back when you didn't know you needed one. That is what happened to me. And that understanding changed my relationship with fear. Fear no longer tells me that everything good is temporary. Fear no longer convinces me that help always hides a cost. I move through my days with more trust. Not blind trust. Human trust. Trust that people are capable of remembering. Trust that kindness does not evaporate. Trust that my life is not as isolated as it sometimes feels. I still have worries. I still have ordinary problems. But they no longer define me. They no longer convince me that I am barely holding on. I am holding. Steady enough. And when I think back to the moment I first saw that envelope on the floor, I realize something gently ironic. I was afraid because I thought someone knew something about me. In the end, they did. They knew me as someone who once mattered deeply. Someone whose actions stayed. And being known in that way is not frightening at all. It is grounding. This story doesn't end with a door closing or a mystery solved. It ends with a woman who understands now that her life leaves impressions she cannot always trace. That her quiet choices have weight. That even when no one is watching, something is being built. I live with that knowledge now. I pay my rent. I open my door. I step into ordinary days with a steadier heart. And when I have the chance to be kind, I don't hesitate as much. because I know now how far that kindness might go. This is where the story rests. Not in shock, not in gratitude that overwhelms, but in calm, in balance, in the simple understanding that what we give does not disappear. It waits, and when it returns, it does so not to surprise us, but to remind us that we were never as unseen as we believed. That reminder stays with me, and it is enough. As I let that reminder stay with me, I don't feel the need to look for anything more. Nothing else is required for this story to feel complete. What happened did not turn my life into something extraordinary. It returned it to something solid. For a long time, I thought survival meant staying alert at all times, watching for what might go wrong, preparing for the next loss. That year quietly changed that habit. It taught me that survival can also mean allowing yourself to rest when rest is offered. I no longer confuse peace with carelessness. Peace is not ignoring reality. It is facing it without panic. That difference matters. I notice it now in how I breathe when I open my bills, in how my shoulders don't tense the way they used to, in how I don't immediately imagine the worst. Those changes are subtle, but they shape a life. I think about how easily I once believed that kindness was rare, that it came with conditions, that it always needed to be repaid quickly or loudly. What I learned is this: some kindness does not want repayment. It wants completion. It wants to close a chapter that was left open. The woman who paid my rent did not want gratitude that made her visible. She wanted to return a feeling. The feeling of steadiness. The feeling of being able to breathe. And once that feeling was returned, her work was done. I respect that now. I don't reach for her story beyond what she shared. Some connections are not meant to continue. They are meant to balance. I carry forward what I was given, not as a debt, but as a guide. A guide for how I want to move through the world. I don't rush past people the way I used to. I don't dismiss quiet needs. I don't underestimate how much a simple gesture can hold. I've learned that people rarely remember what you said. They remember how safe they felt around you. That safety travels. It finds its way back. Not always to the same place, but always with purpose. I am still an ordinary person. I still worry sometimes. I still feel tired. But I no longer feel invisible. And I no longer feel like I am standing alone. Even on days when no one is around, I know I am part of something larger. A chain of small human moments that carry more weight than we realize. I don't tell this story to suggest that kindness will always come back in clear, measurable ways. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you never know what your presence meant. But sometimes, when you least expect it, life reaches back and reminds you. It reminds you that you mattered. That what you did landed somewhere real. That is what happened to me. A stranger paid my rent for a year. And when I found out why, I understood something that changed how I see my own life. I understood that even when I felt lost, I had once been someone else's ground. And knowing that gives you a strength that money cannot buy. It gives you dignity. It gives you patience. It gives you a reason to stay open. So I go on now. Not waiting for another surprise. Not expecting the world to be gentle all the time. Just trusting that what I put into it matters, even when I don't see how. I live quietly. I do what I can. I stay present. And when kindness passes through my hands, I let it go freely. Because I know now that it does not disappear. It waits. And when it returns not to impress you, but to steady you. That is the truth I carry forward. And that is where this story truly, finally rests. As I sit with everything now, there is nothing left that feels unfinished. No loose ends pulling at me. No questions asking to be answered. The story has already done what it came to do. It reminded me that my life is not measured only by what I struggle through, but also by what I quietly give when no one is watching. For a long time, I believed my hardest years were empty years. Years where nothing good stayed. Now I know better. Those years carried seeds I didn't see. They stayed hidden until the right moment. And when they returned, they didn't come back as praise or reward. They came back as steadiness. I don't replay the details anymore. I don't think about dates or amounts. What matters is the feeling that stayed after everything else faded. The feeling that I am not invisible to life. That even when my world felt small, my presence reached farther than I knew. I carry that knowledge into my days now. Into how I listen. Into how I wait. Into how I choose patience instead of fear. I don't rush kindness anymore. I don't question it when it appears. I let it be what it is. Because I understand now that kindness has its own timing. It moves quietly. It waits without demand. And when it returns, it does so gently, without asking to be named. I am still living an ordinary life. I still pay my rent. I still worry sometimes. I still get tired. But I no longer feel like I am barely holding on. I feel grounded. I feel capable. I feel enough. And that is not because someone paid my rent. It is because someone remembered who I was when I had forgotten myself. That kind of remembering changes you. It changes how you stand in your own life. So I go forward now without expecting anything extraordinary. I don't need it. I have already received what mattered most. A reminder that what we give matters, even when we never see where it lands. A reminder that quiet goodness does not disappear. A reminder that we are part of something human and enduring. This is where my story ends. Not with mystery. Not with surprise. But with peace. With balance. With a heart that knows now that nothing good is ever truly lost. And that is enough. After everything settled, I noticed how rarely I felt the urge to explain myself. That urge used to follow me everywhere. As if I needed to justify why I was tired. Why I moved slowly. Why I chose quiet over noise. That urge is gone now. I no longer feel the need to prove that my life has value. It simply does. I understand now that dignity is not something you earn through struggle alone. It grows when you allow yourself to receive without shame. That year taught me how to receive. Not with suspicion. Not with guilt. With grace. And that may be the most difficult lesson of all. I don't tell this story expecting others to see the world the way I do. I tell it because it changed how I see myself. It softened places in me that had stayed guarded for too long. I am still careful. But I am no longer closed. There is room inside me now. Room for uncertainty. Room for kindness. Room for rest. I move through my days without watching the ground for signs of danger. I trust it to hold me. And when it doesn't, I trust myself to adjust. That trust is quiet. But it is strong. If someone were to ask me what I gained from that year, I wouldn't say security. I wouldn't say relief. I would say perspective. The understanding that we leave pieces of ourselves behind in other people's lives. And sometimes, those pieces come back to remind us who we are. That reminder arrived for me in the most unexpected way. Through silence. Through patience. Through a kindness that did not ask to be seen. I carry it with me now. Not as a story I revisit often. But as a feeling that shapes how I live. Steady. Grounded. Unafraid to accept help. Unafraid to give it. This is where I stop. Not because there is nothing more to say. But because everything important has already been felt. And that is enough. As I step fully out of this story, I do so without carrying it like a weight. It rests behind me now, steady and quiet. I don't look for lessons in it anymore. The lesson has already become part of how I live. I wake up. I do what needs to be done. I rest when I can. And I no longer feel like any of that needs permission. I understand now that life does not always announce when something important happens. Sometimes, it happens slowly, month by month, gesture by gesture, choice by choice, and you only realize later how deeply it shaped you. What I received did not make my life perfect. It made it honest. It reminded me that I am allowed to stand where I am without apology, that I am allowed to accept care without shrinking, that I am allowed to believe my presence matters, even when no one says it out loud. I don't carry expectations into the future. I carry trust. Trust that I will notice what matters. Trust that I will respond with care when I can. Trust that even when life is difficult, it is not empty. That trust is enough. So this is where I leave the story. Not with anticipation, not with fear, but with a calm heart and steady hands. I continue living, quietly, honestly, grounded in the knowledge that nothing good I have given was ever wasted, and nothing good I received was an accident. That understanding stays with me, and that is where it ends. There is nothing left that needs to happen for this story to feel whole. No door waiting to open. No message still to arrive. Everything that needed to reach me already did. I carry forward with a quieter heart now. Not because life became easier, but because I stopped believing that I was alone inside it. That belief changes how you stand. It changes how you breathe when things feel heavy. It changes how you meet ordinary days without resentment. I don't hold on to the past with longing. I hold it with understanding. It showed me that even in my weakest moments, I was still capable of being someone's safety. And that knowledge stays with you. It reshapes your sense of self. I go on now without waiting for signs, without listening for footsteps, without wondering if help will come again. I don't need to know. What mattered already happened. I was seen. I was remembered. And I learned that what we give in quiet moments can return in ways we never imagine. This story doesn't end with gratitude spoken aloud. It ends with something deeper. A steady life. A grounded heart. A woman who knows now that she belongs to her own story. And that is enough. That is where it truly ends.